The auditorium lights dimmed, and I felt my program crumpling in my sweaty grip. This was it. My college graduation, 4 years of late nights, stress, and determination, culminating in this single moment. I'd worked so hard to get here, and he'd promised he'd be here too. The front row had one empty seat, reserved, marked with a small card that read, Family of Arden Hayes. My father had texted 20 minutes ago, parking, 2 minutes. I'd smiled with relief, my chest loosening for the first time all morning. 2 minutes became 5, then 10, then 20. The dean stepped to the microphone and began calling names alphabetically. My section was coming up fast. I kept glancing toward the entrance, willing him to appear. Then I saw him, through the glass lobby doors, standing near the refreshment table. Not rushing, not panicking, laughing with a woman I'd never seen before. She was elegant, blonde, touching his arm familiarly while he smiled down at her like she was the only person in the building. My name echoed through the speakers. Arden Elizabeth Hayes. I stood on shaking legs, my vision blurring at the edges. I walked toward the stage, each step feeling mechanical. Cameras flashed. Applause rose around me like water I was drowning in. But all I could see was that empty seat, that broken promise. That man in the lobby who'd chosen to laugh with a stranger instead of watching his daughter graduate. I accepted my diploma with a smile I'd nailed on like armor. Shook the dean's hand. Posed for the official photo. Moved my tassel with everyone else. The audience clapped, but the sound felt distant and hollow. As I walked back to my seat, I looked through the glass doors again. My father saw me this time. He waved, casually. Like I was a stranger he'd recognized across a crowded room. Like he hadn't just missed the most important moment of my young adult life. Then he turned back to the blonde woman, his attention immediately consumed by whatever she was saying. I sat through the rest of the ceremony in a daze. Listened to speeches about futures and possibilities, watched other families embrace their graduates with tears and flowers and pride. When it finally ended, I gathered my things slowly. My father appeared in the aisle, the woman beside him. No apology in his expression, no guilt, just casual pleasantness. Arden, congratulations! He hugged me briefly, awkwardly. Sorry we missed the walk. Parking was a nightmare. He'd said we. This is Vanessa, he continued, gesturing to the blonde woman. She extended a perfectly manicured hand, her smile warm but somehow calculated. It's wonderful to finally meet you. Finally. How long had she existed in my father's life without my knowledge? My father cleared his throat, his hand finding Vanessa's waist. We have some news, actually. We're engaged. The words hit me like cold water. Engaged. He was engaged to someone I'd never met. Someone he'd prioritized over my graduation. Someone who was now apparently more important than I was. My name is Arden Hayes, and I'm 22 years old. I grew up believing my father was my anchor. The one steady thing in a world that often felt chaotic and uncertain. My mother had left when I was young, so it had been just the two of us for most of my childhood. He'd been everything. Coach, cheerleader, protector, friend. But something had shifted over the past year. Phone calls became shorter, visits became rarer, promises became suggestions that dissolved into nothing. I'd told myself he was busy, that work was demanding, that I was being too needy, too dependent, too much of a child when I should be acting like an adult. But standing in that auditorium hallway, watching him glow beside Vanessa while barely looking at me, I understood. I hadn't been too needy. I'd become optional. So when did this happen? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. The engagement? My father exchanged a glance with Vanessa. About 2 months ago. We wanted to tell you in person. 2 months. 2 months of conversations where he'd never mentioned her. 2 months of me asking about his life and getting vague answers. 2 months of being deliberately excluded. Don't make this weird, Arden, my father said quietly, hastily reading something in my expression. I'm happy. I hope you can be happy for me. Vanessa touched his arm gently, then looked at me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Your father told me you'd understand, she said softly. Especially about the money situation. He said you were mature enough to handle adult realities. The money situation became clear 3 weeks later when I checked my student account. My tuition balance, which my father had always promised to help with like always, sat there like a punch to my stomach, due immediately. I'd been counting on his contribution, had budgeted around it, had made decisions based on the assumption that his word meant something. I called him. The phone rang and rang. Voicemail. I called again an hour later. Voicemail. Again that evening. Voicemail. Finally, the next afternoon, he answered. His voice carried irritation, not concern. Arden, hey, I'm kind of in the middle of something. Dad, I need to talk about the tuition payment. The balance is due and I thought, oh, he exhaled heavily. Yeah, about that. I can't right now. Vanessa and I are closing on a house. I felt something crack inside my chest. A house? A really beautiful property. You'll love it when you visit. But the down payment wiped out my liquidity. You understand? I didn't understand. I didn't understand how buying a house with a woman he'd known less than a year took priority over helping his daughter finish the education he'd promised to support. I just need the amount we discussed, I said carefully. Even a partial payment would help. Arden, his tone shifted to something harder, paternal in the worst way. I can't right now. You'll figure it out. That's what adulthood is. In the background, I heard Vanessa's voice, muffled but clear enough. Tell her we already talked about this. We hadn't talked about anything. But apparently, they had. I called back the next day, swallowing my pride. Dad, I know you're busy with the house, but could we maybe set up a payment plan? Something small that I could. He exhaled like I was asking for a luxury vacation instead of help surviving. Arden, I'm not made of money. You got your degree. Now you need to stand on your own feet. I'm not asking you to carry me. I'm asking for what you promised. Things change. Circumstances change. You're an adult now. Adults adapt. My throat felt tight. So everything you said about supporting my education, that's just gone? Don't be dramatic. His voice was clipped now, annoyed. You'll figure it out. Get a job, take out loans, do what everyone else does. In the background, Vanessa again. Clearer this time. Babe, we're gonna be late for the showing. I have to go, my father said. We'll talk later. He hung up before I could respond. I sat in my small apartment, diploma on the wall, student debt crushing me, and felt something fundamental shift. The father I'd known, the man who'd stayed up helping me with homework and celebrated every small achievement, was gone. In his place was someone who'd decided I was no longer worth the investment. I looked at my bank account, at the bills, at the final notice on my desk. Then I started searching for jobs. Any jobs. All the jobs. Because my father was right about one thing. I would figure it out. Just not the way he imagined. I took a night job at a 24-hour diner, graveyard shift, Thursday through Sunday. The pay was barely minimum wage, but it was something. Then I picked up weekend shifts at a campus bookstore. My schedule became a careful puzzle where sleep was a luxury I couldn't always afford. Coffee became dinner more often than I wanted to admit. I stopped going out with friends, stopped pretending I could afford the life I'd had before. Pride became a thin pillow I slept on because it was all I had left that felt like mine. I didn't tell anyone what was happening. Couldn't bear the pity or the questions. Just worked and studied and worked again, moving through days that blurred together into exhaustion. My father called once during those weeks. Asked how I was doing. I said fine. He seemed relieved, not curious. Didn't ask about school or money or anything that mattered. Just filled the silence with talk about Vanessa's renovation plans and their upcoming trip to Napa. I listened and made appropriate sounds and hated how easy it was to pretend nothing was wrong. Then a letter arrived. Official university letterhead. Final notice. My enrollment status was at risk due to outstanding balance. I had 2 weeks to pay or face suspension. I stared at that letter until the words stopped making sense, then folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. I couldn't think about it. Couldn't process what suspension would mean for my future. So I just kept working, kept moving, kept surviving one shift at a time. My father called on a random Tuesday like nothing had happened, like we were normal, like he hadn't abandoned his promises and his daughter in one smooth motion. Arden, hey, how's it going? His voice was cheerful, casual. Want to come to brunch this weekend? Let's reset. I feel like we've been disconnected. Reset. Like our relationship was a computer that just needed rebooting. I wanted to say no. Wanted to protect myself from more disappointment, but some small, stubborn part of me still wanted him to be who he used to be. Still hoped he'd remember he had a daughter who needed him. Okay, I said quietly. Sunday? Perfect. There's this great place Vanessa loves. You'll love it too. Sunday arrived, cold and bright. The restaurant was expensive, the kind of place where water glasses were refilled before they emptied and prices weren't listed on the menu. My father and Vanessa were already seated when I arrived. They looked perfect together, polished, happy, complete without me. We made small talk. I asked about the house. Vanessa showed me photos on her phone. Marble countertops, vaulted ceilings, a future I wasn't part of. Then my father reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out an envelope, cream-colored, thick. I wanted to give you something, he said, sliding it across the table toward me. Hope flared in my chest, painful and desperate. Maybe he'd remembered. Maybe he'd heard me even when I'd tried to hide my struggling. Maybe this was the help I desperately needed. Then Vanessa's hand landed on his arm. Gentle but firm. She didn't say anything, just looked at him. One look, that was all it took. My father pulled the envelope back like he'd touched something burning. The movement was quick, instinctive, obedient. Actually, you know what? Not today, he said lightly, tucking it back into his jacket. Let's just enjoy brunch. I sat there, hand still extended slightly toward where the envelope had been. Feeling foolish. Feeling like a child who'd reached for something that was never really meant for her. What was it? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, just something I thought you might want, but the timing isn't right. He picked up his menu like the moment hadn't happened. Like he hadn't just dangled hope and snatched it away. Vanessa changed the subject smoothly, talking about wedding venues. Beach or garden, traditional or modern. I listened and nodded and felt myself disappearing. When the food came, I pushed it around my plate. My father didn't notice, was too absorbed in Vanessa's ideas about floral arrangements and guest lists. I excused myself to the bathroom, halfway through the meal, stood in front of the mirror and tried to recognize the person staring back. When I returned, they were laughing about something on Vanessa's phone. I sat down quietly, invisible. As brunch ended and we stood to leave, Vanessa touched my shoulder. Her smile was kind, pitying, poisonous. You're so strong, Arden, she said softly. You really don't need him like that. You'll be fine on your own. The words were meant to sound supportive, but I heard the real message underneath. You don't need him. So stop expecting anything. Stop being a burden. Stop existing in the space we're building. That night, I sat in my apartment and stared at my phone until my eyes ached. I scrolled through old photos. Me and my father at my high school graduation, at my first college move-in, at holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesdays that had felt special because we were together. All those moments felt like evidence from a different timeline, proof that I'd once mattered to someone who couldn't even remember to give me an envelope. I opened our text thread, saw the pattern of my messages versus his. Me asking questions, him giving short answers. Me sharing news, him responding days later with emojis. Me being the only one trying. Then I did something that felt like ripping off my own skin. I stopped. I didn't call, didn't text first, didn't reach out with updates or questions or the performance of being fine that made him comfortable. I just stopped trying to maintain a relationship he'd already abandoned. 2 days later, he sent one line. Busy week. We'll catch up soon. I stared at that message and felt something die quietly inside me. Not anger, not even hurt anymore. Just grief. I was grieving someone who was still alive. Someone who was out there living happily, posting photos of his new life, existing fully without me. And the worst part was knowing he probably didn't even notice I'd stopped calling. Probably felt relieved. Probably appreciated that I'd finally learned to leave him alone. That night, I cried in a way I hadn't since childhood. Not loud, not dramatic. Just silent tears that didn't stop until I finally fell asleep on my couch, still in my work uniform, too exhausted to make it to my bed. My supervisor at the diner noticed something during my next shift. I don't know what she saw. Maybe the exhaustion I couldn't hide anymore. Maybe the way my hands shook slightly when I poured coffee. Maybe just the general weight I was carrying. She didn't ask questions. Just quietly adjusted my schedule, giving me slightly fewer overnight shifts and slightly more evening ones that paid the same. You need sleep, she said simply. Can't work if you're dead. A coworker named Jules started bringing me leftovers from her family dinners, Tupperware containers that appeared in my locker with sticky notes. Thought you might want this. No pity. No judgment. Just food I didn't have to buy. Small kindnesses became the scaffolding holding me up. A professor who extended a deadline when I showed up to office hours looking half dead. A classmate who shared her textbook when I couldn't afford the new edition. People who barely knew me offering more support than the man who'd raised me. Then I received an email that made my hands shake. Subject line, scholarship nomination notification. I'd been nominated for the Chancellor's Achievement Scholarship. Competitive. Full coverage for final year expenses. Life-changing. I read through the requirements carefully. Application essay, transcript, letters of recommendation. And there, at the bottom of the requirements list, one line that made my stomach drop. Letter of recommendation required from parent or legal guardian. I stared at that line, at the only barrier between me and potential salvation. My father. I needed my father to write a letter, to show up for me one more time, to prove I was worth the effort. I wanted to throw my laptop across the room. Instead, I picked up my phone. I called him once, just once, swallowed every bit of remaining pride and asked, "Dad, I need your help with something." "Sure, kiddo, what's up?" The casual warmth in his voice felt like a lie. I was nominated for a scholarship, a big one. It could cover my remaining tuition. "That's great, see, I told you you'd figure it out." My jaw tightened. "I need a letter of recommendation, from you, it's required." "Oh. Pause, when do you need it?" "Deadline is in 2 weeks." "Okay, send me the details and I'll take a look." Hope rose dangerously in my chest, painful and sharp and terrifying. "Really? Of course, you're my daughter." Those words should have meant something, should have carried weight. Instead, they felt hollow, performative. "Thank you," I whispered. "I'll send everything tonight." "Sounds good, talk soon." I sent him the information immediately, the scholarship portal link, the specific requirements, a draft outline of talking points, everything he'd need to write a strong letter. Then I waited, checked my email obsessively, refreshed the portal, watched the days count down, 1 week left. I texted him, "Hey Dad, just checking on the letter?" No response. 3 days left. I called. Voicemail. 2 days left. I called again. He answered. "Oh Arden, hi, yeah, I've been meaning to get to that. I'll do it tonight." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you so much, I really appreciate." "No problem, gotta run, talk later." The deadline passed, he never submitted it, the portal closed, the opportunity disappeared, and he never mentioned it again. Not once. Like it had never existed. Like my future was just another task he'd meant to get to but forgot. I didn't scream, didn't call and demand an explanation. Didn't send angry texts. I just made a decision, quiet, definitive, final. I would never put my future in his hands again. Never depend on promises that dissolved like sugar in water. Never wait for someone who'd proven repeatedly that I wasn't worth showing up for. The decision felt like peace, cold, hard peace. I applied for more jobs, took out loans I didn't want, built a life that didn't include him in any essential capacity. My father became someone I knew but didn't need. Someone whose presence was optional rather than necessary. 3 weeks later, I saw photos online. My father and Vanessa at a charity gala. Formal wear, champagne glasses, smiling beside a banner that read "Supporting Youth Education." The irony was so sharp it cut. Comments filled the post. "What an amazing cause. You two are so generous. Such a great dad, supporting education." I stared at that screen until I couldn't tell if I was angry or numb. This man who couldn't write one letter for his actual daughter was being celebrated for supporting education in theory. Was being praised for generosity he showed strangers but withheld from me. I wanted to comment, to expose the hypocrisy, to make people see who he really was. Instead, I closed the app, went to work, focused on what I could control, because rage was exhausting, hurt was exhausting, and I needed my energy for survival, not revenge. Then my landlord slid a notice under my door. Rent increase, effective immediately. $50 more per month. Might as well have been $500 with my budget. I sat on my floor reading that notice over and over, doing math that wouldn't work no matter how many times I tried. I picked up another shift. My body became a schedule that didn't include rest. I studied on break room floors during 15-minute breaks, wrote essays on my phone between orders, memorized flashcards while walking to my car. And sometimes late at night when the diner was empty except for the cook and one lonely trucker, I'd cry quietly in the bathroom stall. Just for a minute. Just enough to release the pressure. Then I'd wash my face, fix my makeup, and go back to work like nothing had happened. My father's social media showed a different story. House tours, weekend trips, expensive dinners. A life that was full and happy and completely separate from mine. I stopped looking, stopped torturing myself with evidence of how easy it was for him to move on, stopped measuring my worth against his capacity for forgetting. 2 months passed like this. Then one night, my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. My heart did something stupid. Something hopeful. Dad? Arden, hey. His voice was urgent, almost excited. I need to talk to you about something. For 1 second, I thought he'd finally seen me, finally realized what he'd done, finally decided to fix it. What's going on? I asked carefully. I need a favor. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't mention the scholarship or graduation or anything that involved acknowledging me as a person. Just launched straight into his request. Vanessa's father is a pretty important businessman. We're meeting him for dinner next week, and I could really use your help smoothing things over. I sat down slowly. Smoothing what over? He's a bit old-fashioned, family-oriented, thinks it's important that I have a good relationship with my daughter. The words hung in the air like poison. So you want me to pretend we have a good relationship? I wouldn't say pretend. Just show up. Be yourself. You're good with people. Charming. It would really help me out. Help him out. Not, I miss you, or I want to see you, or I've been a terrible father and I'm sorry. Just a transaction, a favor, a performance he needed me to give. Why would I do that? I asked quietly. Because I'm your father, and I'm asking. His tone shifted, became slightly harder, slightly less friendly. Because family helps each other. Family. The word felt like a slap. When's the dinner? I heard myself ask. Next Saturday, 7 p.m. I'll text you the address. He sounded relieved, grateful. Thanks, Arden. You're really helping me out here. After we hung up, I stared at my phone. Wondering why I'd agreed. Wondering if some part of me still hoped that showing up for him would make him finally show up for me. Wondering if I'd ever learn. The dinner was at an exclusive restaurant downtown, the kind where they have a dress code and menus without prices. I wore my one nice dress, bought for graduation. Vanessa wore something that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her father was exactly what I'd expected. Successful. Imposing. The type of man who was used to being the most important person in any room. My father played charming, told stories, laughed at appropriate moments. Vanessa shined beside him, the perfect partner. I sat quietly, watching the performance. This is Arden, my daughter, my father said when introductions were made. Not my daughter Arden. The order mattered. I was a category before I was a person. Vanessa's father, whose name was Preston, barely acknowledged me. A handshake. A polite nod. Then his attention returned to my father. The conversation flowed around me. Business, investments, opportunities. I was scenery, background, proof that my father had successfully procreated at some point, but nothing more. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself to the bathroom. Needed air, needed space, needed to remember why I was here. In the hallway outside the restrooms I heard voices. Low, urgent. I stopped. Listened. Vanessa, speaking to my father, her voice sharp despite the whisper. Your daughter is a reminder, she hissed. I told you. Keep her managed. Preston's already questioning your judgment. My father laughed. Awkward. Weak. He didn't defend me, didn't correct her. Just made a sound that meant he agreed. That meant he'd keep me managed. That meant I was a problem to be controlled. I stood in that hallway, breathing slowly, feeling something inside me go completely still. Not hurt anymore. Not even angry. Just clear. Crystal clear about exactly who these people were. I returned to the table, sat down, smiled politely, ate my expensive food that tasted like ash, played the role I'd been summoned to play. Near the end of dinner, Preston leaned toward my father. Loud enough for me to hear. Probably intentionally. You're sure about the prenup? He asked. Clean break if things don't work out? She'll never get anything from you again, right? The she he meant was me. Not Vanessa. Me. My father hesitated. Just a second. That's all handled? He said finally. Preston nodded, satisfied. Good. Can't be too careful. Entitled kids these days think they're owed everything. I took a sip of water, set down my glass carefully, looked at my father across the table. He couldn't meet my eyes. Vanessa was scrolling her phone, half listening, Preston was already moving on to another topic, and I was done, completely, utterly, finally done. I stood up, gathered my purse. "Excuse me," I said calmly. "I need to leave." My father looked up, surprised. "Arden, we haven't had dessert yet. I'm not hungry." I looked at him, really looked at him, saw the weakness, the selfishness, the man who'd chosen new money over his own blood. "Thank you for dinner, but I need to go." I walked out before anyone could respond. The night air hit my lungs like freedom, cold and sharp and clean. I pulled out my phone and sent one text. "I'm done auditioning for love." Then I blocked his number, blocked Vanessa, blocked that entire chapter of my life. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning, I woke up expecting regret, expecting panic, expecting the desperate urge to undo what I'd done. Instead, I felt lighter. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Arden? This is Harold Fitch. I'm a friend of your father's." The name was familiar. My father had mentioned Harold occasionally. An old friend from college, someone from before Vanessa. "How did you get my number?" I asked carefully. "Your father gave it to me years ago. I'm calling because, well, I think you should know something about your situation. Could we meet?" Something in his tone made me agree. We met at a coffee shop near campus. Harold was older, 60s maybe, with kind eyes that looked tired. He ordered coffee for both of us and sat down heavily. "I need to tell you some things your father won't," he began, "and I'm probably violating his trust by doing this. But I've watched what's happening, and I can't stay silent anymore." I waited. "Your father isn't wealthy the way you probably think. He's drowning financially." The words didn't match the house photos, the vacation posts, the expensive dinners. "What do you mean?" "He made a bad business investment about 2 years ago. Lost almost everything. The debt is massive. He's been scrambling to keep up appearances ever since." I tried to process this. But the house, the trips, everything with Vanessa, is financed by her father's money and his own desperation to look successful. Harold leaned forward. "He stopped helping you not because he didn't care, Arden. He stopped because he was ashamed, hiding, trying to keep Vanessa from knowing how bad things really are." I sat there, coffee getting cold, trying to reconcile what Harold was saying with everything I'd experienced. "That doesn't excuse abandoning me," I said quietly. "No," Harold agreed. "It doesn't, but I think you should understand the full picture." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know the truth, and because Vanessa's been steering his choices very carefully. She knows about some of the debt, but not all of it, and she's made it clear that any money going to you is money not available for their lifestyle." The pieces started fitting together. The pulled-back envelope, the missed scholarship letter, the constant deflection. It wasn't just cruelty. It was fear, shame, weakness, disguised as moving on. "So what am I supposed to do with this information?" I asked. Harold pulled out a business card. "This is your grandmother's estate attorney, your father's mother. She passed 5 years ago." I remembered. My grandmother had been kind, quiet, had always seemed to understand me in ways my father didn't. "What about her?" "She left something for you. Your father was supposed to tell you when you turned 18, but he never did." My hands went cold. "What did she leave?" "Call this attorney. Ask about the educational trust." Harold stood, putting money on the table for the coffee. "And Arden, whatever you decide to do with this information, do it for yourself, not to punish him, not to save him, for yourself." After he left, I stared at that business card for a long time. Then I made the call. The attorney's name was Miss Chen. Wait, that's a band name. Let me use a different one. The attorney's name was Miss Patricia Reeves. She sounded surprised when I called. "Arden Hayes, I've been waiting for this call for 4 years. My father never told me about any trust." "I know. I asked him about that multiple times. He always said the timing wasn't right." She paused. "Can you come to my office? This conversation should happen in person." I went that afternoon. Skipped a shift I couldn't afford to skip because this felt more important. Miss Reeves's office was professional but warm. She pulled up files on her computer and turned the screen toward me. "Your grandmother established an educational trust for you when you were born. She contributed to it regularly until she passed. The current balance is approximately $48,000. I stopped breathing. 48,000? designated specifically for educational expenses, tuition, books, room and board if needed, housing costs related to school. Tears blurred my vision. Why didn't my father tell me? Miss Reeves's expression was carefully neutral. Only he can answer that, but I can tell you that Vanessa found out about the trust about 6 months ago. She contacted me directly asking about your father's access to the funds. What did you tell her? That the trust is irrevocable. The funds belong to you and you alone. Your father has no legal claim to them. Miss Reeves pulled up another document. However, Vanessa has been pressuring your father to keep you uninformed while he tries to redirect certain family assets to strengthen his position with her family. It clicked into place. The envelope at brunch, the missed scholarship letter, the constant deflection. My father hadn't just abandoned me emotionally. He'd nearly erased my future financially, to impress a woman, to maintain an illusion of wealth, to avoid admitting failure. I walked out of that office with paperwork that changed everything. Authorization to access the trust, distribution forms, tax documents, proof that my grandmother had seen a future for me even when my father couldn't. I went back to my apartment, sat on my floor, read through everything twice. Then I cried. Not from hurt this time, from relief, from grief, from the overwhelming realization that I'd been fighting alone when I'd had help all along. I'd just never known to look for it. The trust covered everything. My remaining tuition, my rent increase, the breathing room I desperately needed. I filed the paperwork, set up distributions, built a budget that included actual food and sleep. For the first time in months, I could think about something other than survival, could plan beyond the next shift, could imagine a future that wasn't defined by constant struggle. A week later, a letter arrived from the university. Dear Miss Hayes, we are pleased to inform you that your enrollment has been secured through graduation. Additionally, we would like to notify you that an anonymous donor has contributed to your student account. I called the financial aid office. The anonymous donor, do you have any information about who it was? The representative checked her records. I can't give you the name without their permission, but I can tell you the contribution came from a trust your grandmother established. Is that helpful? My grandmother, still taking care of me years after her death, still making sure I had what I needed even when her son failed to. That night, I wrote her a letter I'd never be able to send. Thanked her. Told her about my struggles and my survival. Told her I wished I'd known her better. Told her I'd make her proud. Then I folded it carefully and put it with my important documents. A promise to myself to remember where real love had come from. 2 days later, my mentor from the scholarship committee called. Professor Holland. She'd always been supportive, even when I'd lost the opportunity. Arden, can you meet me after class tomorrow? There's something I need to discuss with you. I showed up nervous, uncertain. She gestured to a chair across from her desk and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Soft, careful, like she was about to deliver news that required handling. The scholarship committee was disappointed when your application was incomplete, she began. You were our top candidate. I know, I'm sorry. I tried, she held up a hand. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad. I'm telling you because the board made an unusual decision. She slid a folder across the desk. We had an anonymous donor step forward after the deadline. They funded a scholarship specifically for you, full coverage for your final year. I stared at the folder, at the official letter inside, at the amount that would change everything. Who? I whispered. Professor Holland's expression shifted, became more careful. The donor requested complete anonymity, but the board requires internal documentation of funding sources for audit purposes. She paused. You should know where this came from, even if officially you're not supposed to. My heart pounded. Tell me. The donation came from a trust, connected to your late grandmother. Your father was listed as the trustee, but the funds themselves were designated for your education. My hands shook. My father funded this? Not exactly, the trust funded it. Your father would have had to approve the distribution. But according to our records, he initially refused, then changed his mind about 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, right after I'd walked out of that dinner, right after I'd blocked him, right after I'd stopped waiting for him to choose me. I called Harold that evening. Did you talk to my father about the trust? I may have mentioned that you'd found out about it, Harold admitted. And I may have suggested that keeping you in the dark was unconscionable. What did he say? He was angry at first, then quiet. Then he asked me what he should do. Harold paused. I told him he should let you have what your mother intended without making it about him, without using it as leverage for reconciliation. So the scholarship came from the trust that should have been available to you all along. Your father signed the authorization. But Arden, he didn't do it to be generous. He did it because I told him you'd already secured the funds independently, and anything less than full support would prove he'd been deliberately withholding your inheritance. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt complicated. There's more you should know, Harold continued. Your grandmother's trust wasn't small. The educational portion was $48,000, but there's also a separate account for general support. It's been accruing interest since she passed. How much? About $75,000. Your father was supposed to give you access at 18, but he claimed you weren't mature enough. Then he said he was waiting for the right time. My grandmother had left me $123,000, and my father had hidden it for 4 years while I struggled to survive, while I worked 3 jobs and skipped meals and cried in bathroom stalls, while he bought houses and took trips and built a new life with someone else's money. What do? I asked. You secure it legally under your name only, Harold said firmly. You remove your father's access. You build the life your grandmother wanted for you, and you never ever let him use it as control again. I met with Miss Reeves again. This time, I came prepared. I want to secure all the trust funds under my control. Legally. Completely. My father should have no access or decision-making power. Miss Reeves smiled, not surprised, approving. I was hoping you'd say that. I have the paperwork ready. We spent 2 hours going through documents, signatures, authorizations, legal protections that meant my father couldn't touch, redirect, or manipulate the funds my grandmother had left for me. When it was done, Miss Reeves looked at me seriously. Your father will find out about this within 48 hours. The bank will notify him that his trustee access has been revoked. He may try to contact you. I've blocked his number. He'll find other ways. Be prepared. I nodded. What would you do, if you were me? Miss Reeves leaned back in her chair. I'd remember that protecting yourself isn't revenge. It's responsibility. Your grandmother trusted you with this inheritance. Honor that trust by using it wisely, not to punish your father, but to build the life you deserve. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Secure. Grounded. In control of my own future. No more waiting for someone else to decide I was worth supporting. No more performing for love that should have been unconditional. No more accepting crumbs and calling it care. That evening, I paid off my debt, set up automatic rent payments, bought groceries that weren't just ramen and coffee, small things that felt enormous. 3 days later, someone knocked on my door. Late, insistent. I looked through the peephole. My father, alone, no Vanessa, eyes red like he'd been crying. I almost didn't open it, almost let him stand there, but something made me unlock the door. We sat at my kitchen table like strangers trying to learn a new language. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. I know you secured the trust, he said quietly. Harold called me. I waited. I deserve that. I deserve your anger and your distance and everything you're feeling. His voice cracked. I need you to know why. Harold told me. The debt, the shame, Vanessa. It's more than that. He looked at his hands, old hands. When had he gotten old? When your mother left, I promised myself I'd give you everything. Be everything. But I couldn't. I failed at my business, failed at maintaining the life I'd built, failed at being the father you needed. So you chose someone new. I chose an escape. Vanessa represented a fresh start. No history, no failure, no disappointed daughter watching me struggle. The words hurt. But I let him continue. I let her steer me because it was easier than admitting I'd failed you. Easier than facing that I'd hidden your inheritance, because using it would mean admitting I couldn't provide anymore. He pulled an envelope from his jacket, the same cream-colored one from brunch. I wanted to give you this that day. It's your grandmother's letter. She gave it to me before she died. Made me promise to give it to you when you were old enough to understand. Why didn't you? because reading it meant admitting I'd failed to be the person she believed I could be. He slid the envelope across the table. I can't fix what I did, Arden. The years I stole, the support I withheld, the father I failed to be. His eyes met mine. But I can show up now, consistently, quietly, for the rest of my life. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a letter in my grandmother's handwriting. Familiar loops and careful curves. My dearest Arden, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But I wanted you to know that you were loved fiercely by someone who saw exactly who you were and who you could become. This trust is my promise that you'll have the foundation to build whatever life you dream. Don't let anyone, not even my son, convince you that you're not worthy of every opportunity. If your father ever loses his way, don't lose yours. You are stronger than you know, and you are loved beyond measure. Always, Grandma. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and looked at my father. I accept your apology, I said slowly, but I need you to understand something. I don't need you anymore, not the way I used to. I've learned to survive without you. He nodded, tears falling. I know. But, I continued, I'm willing to let you try, not as the father who provides, but as a person who shows up, consistently, without expectations or conditions. How do I do that? Therapy. Together and separate. A calendar invite every week that you don't cancel. Honesty about your life without using me as emotional labor. Boundaries that protect both of us. I paused. And Vanessa needs to understand I'm not going anywhere. I'm not a problem to manage. I'm your daughter. If she can't accept that, then you'll need to make a choice. My father reached across the table, stopped, asked permission with his eyes. I nodded. He took my hand. Can we start over? Not forgetting, but rebuilding? We didn't hug like in movies. Didn't have a tearful reunion that fixed everything. We just sat there. Two broken people trying to figure out how to be family again. And weeks later, when we started therapy together, when he showed up on time and did the work and chose honesty over comfort, I realized something important. The revenge I'd imagined, public exposure, cutting him off completely, making him hurt the way he'd hurt me, wasn't what I needed. What I needed was freedom. Freedom from waiting. Freedom from needing his approval to know my worth. Freedom from measuring my value by his capacity to see it. I'd stopped waiting for him to show up, and that's when he finally did. Not because I'd needed him, but because I'd finally learned I was worth showing up for, with or without him.